You're welcome to Tuesdays with Tim. This is Latter Daily Digest, and we're having some technical difficulties, which does happen, but we hope that everything goes well. Let's see. The show tonight, restoration of Mormon polygamy, because in the news over the last couple of weeks was sort of things that were dropped on the LDS website for reading material. They're kind of like cartoony things teaching children about polygamy. Does anybody have anything they want to say about that right now?
First of all, I think it's hilarious. We're starting off the show about polygamy with nothing but men. This is going to be a great show, you guys. Strap yourself in. 4 men talking about polygamy. Let's do this.
Yeah.
Now,
once the women are done with their chores, they can join the show. Which, they're invited, and I don't know why they haven't. Megan says she's going to hop on soon.
Yeah. It's like that battleship box image from like the 60s where it's fun for the whole family, and it's the father and son playing, battleship, and then the mother or daughter in the background doing dishes,
Hey, look, the first time polygamy was invented, women were not part of the discussion, just as they were not part of the formation of the proclamation on the family. So we're doing it right.
Yeah, we're being historically accurate here. Yeah,
that's right. Historically accurate. And I was on vacation in Arizona, and I haven't put my ducks in a row the way I could have for the show, so I apologize. But it's mostly like we're just in Tim's living room, just chatting about stuff. So people were talking about the things that were issued by the church as not what they call it, like grooming. They were talking like grooming children, right? To make it say, and then other people, it's like they're doing inoculation, right? They're going to find out when they're older that Joseph Smith did polygamy. Let's just teach them young and see how that goes. But then I thought, well, if you were ever going to bring back polygamy, you'd want to teach the youth about polygamy and how it's hard, but it might be what's necessary. In fact, I recall lots of people in elders' quorums, the old guys sitting in the back room saying, hey, polygamy has to come back in order for Jesus to return because there has to be a restoration of all things. And Tim had some quotes that I have failed to find where they are again now. And so I'll try to locate those. Well, maybe Robert, you can chime in with what your thoughts on what the church did and the future.
Yeah, well, not only is the church inoculating young children with the idea of polygamy, but as the church expands into Africa and India, places where potential converts are already involved in tribal polygamy as part of their culture, this is an issue that they will have to deal with. So there's justification why they could do it. Now the question is, will they do it? What do you think, Tim?
I think I'm almost positive they're going to bring it back.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
When I was on my mission in Germany, we taught a polygamist. He was from Syria, I think. Syria or Jordan. And he was a polygamist. And I remember asking the mission president if we baptized him, what are we going to do about his wives? And he says, well, I'll contact Salt Lake and we'll see what they say. And basically they would let him keep his wives, was the response. And I had heard rumors that had happened before. So he said, we'll probably let him keep his wives. Just don't make noise about it or something. But I'm positive that is exactly why they're doing this, that they're inoculating the younger generation because it's going to come back.
I want to jump in real quick because I've noticed something, and I would argue this started back in 2020 when I first came to Utah. Anecdotally, when I came to Utah, what did we hear people say? I want to get married in the temple. Now what are people saying? I want to be sealed in the temple. There's a reason for this, in my opinion, is being married in a temple is a government recognized and regulated institution that, you follow certain laws, right? A temple sealing, being sealed in a temple, is just a religious ritual that is not government regulated. So I would argue this change in verbiage is also a part of this, because now with everyone saying, oh, I want to be sealed in the temple, well, the government doesn't really regulate that. So, hey, we can get sealed to however many people we want.
And the church can discriminate against gay people with sealings because, hey, it's not marriage. We're talking sealings here.
That's right. That's right. Yes. Sealings. That's a magic word. Yes. Very much so.
Yeah.
I would like to make my theological case for polygamy coming back, if you'll bear with me, gentlemen.
Oh, here we go. If
the church is true, polygamy must come back, at least as early as the millennium. I cite 2 Nephi chapter 14, which says, "And in that day 7 women shall take hold of one man, saying, We will eat our own bread and wear our own apparel, only let us be called by thy name, and take away our reproach." The chapter heading there describes this as Zion and her daughters will be redeemed in the millennial day. And early church leaders cited this to justify polygamy. So that's evidence number 1. Number 2, in the first edition of Mormon Doctrine by Bruce R. McConkie, in the chapter called Plural Marriage, he ends with this, quote, "Obviously, the holy practice will commence again after the second coming and the ushering in of the millennium." Third evidence, D&C 132 describes the everlasting covenant, that it shall be in full force when they are out of this world. We don't know when the second coming is going to happen, but if it happened tomorrow, those that are headed for a celestial resurrection would be caught up to meet Jesus in the clouds and would be here. Now, that would include June Dixon Oaks, President Oaks' first wife, to whom he is sealed as his, quote, eternal companion, alongside his current wife, Kristen McMain, who is also, he considers his eternal companion. Also coming back would be Brigham Young, John Taylor, Heber C. Kimball, Joseph Smith, and their plural wives, who would still probably be preaching that polygamy is a requirement for celestial glory. My fifth evidence is John Taylor's 1896 revelation about polygamy, where God told him, "I have not revoked this law, nor will I, for it is everlasting." So if the church is true, by the millennium, which could be tomorrow, it has to bring back polygamy. What do you think?
Well, the last point you bring up is kind of interesting, because by that point, the plural wives, and going off of what I said earlier, the sealings, technically polygamy never went away, right? Because, Mormon Joe marries wife 1 and they're sealed, she dies. He gets sealed to wife number 2, she dies. He gets sealed to wife number 3, they both die. Everyone's in heaven, and he goes up with 3 wives because they were sealed, even though they were married legally, individually. So, did it ever go away?
No, never went away. It went away for this life, but not for the next life. So.
Yeah, because doesn't the scripture say for God, he has never given a commandment that is temporal, but all things are spiritual to him. So if it was ever in effect, it's in effect.
But there are temporary commandments. Remember that.
Oh, right. Yeah, my bad. Yeah. I'm
No, an old missionary companion of mine reminded me that back in 1974 or 75 at a mission conference with McConkie said that if Jesus doesn't come back by 2025, he's not coming back. So
This is the year.
this is the year. This is the year, if ever there's a year. Oh, what do we got?
Real quick, I think Debbie requested the link to join Gene.
And what we're looking at there is a screenshot of Mormon Doctrine, first edition, Bruce R. McConkie, where he says, obviously, the holy practice of plural marriage will commence at the second coming.
Okay. Yes. Yes.
Now, I have one more thought about polygamy coming back. There could be pressure on the church in Africa, in India, to bring it back. Oh, wait a minute. Is everybody still here, or did we all get kicked off?
So we're here. I'm just showing the thing that you shared, and I'm trying to figure out how to make it bigger so that people can see this quote where you said, Wilford Woodruff said, or at the end of the quote in the Journal of Discourses, it says, obviously, the holy practice will commence again after the second coming of the Son of Man and the ushering in of the millennium. And so we have that now on this, and so people can go back and scroll to the top, and then you can, press pause in the future and then read the rest of this on your own. And we have it.
So for those believing Latter-day Saints out there who, like me, sat in elders quorum on the DNC 132 lesson and thought to yourself, "Ooh, I'm glad we don't have to deal with polygamy. I'm not interested in that at all. Neither is my wife." Hey, if the second coming is tomorrow, you're going to be dealing with it, and so is your wife.
That's right. That's right. Yes.
Now, my thought is that if the church were to bring polygamy back before the second coming, how would they do it? Would they start it in countries where it's needed, like Africa or India?
There's Debbie.
Or hey, there she is.
Hi, there she is.
If they brought polygamy back, would they do it the way they did other things in the past? And what I mean by that is it'll start with the elites, whether it's garments, endowments, 18-year-olds going out on missions. It always starts with the leadership. And then later, the general membership finds out about it and gets to participate in these things.
So an inner circle.
Yeah. Yeah.
Debbie thinks that polygamy in the inner circle is happening in Utah Valley, the state of Utah right now. Right, Debbie?
Well, when I talked to
described it. I mean, I think we've just described like how it's working and thriving in Utah, because you can look at the Kingston group with the order, and if you want to check out a channel, there are those channels, and the FLDS, it is still alive and well. And Utah has not prosecuted it, even though they agreed to prosecute it as a state, a condition of statehood. They've allowed this polygamy to thrive and flourish. So all of these topics and conversations can absolutely be like oh God, I just, it never died. As a woman, I'm just like, it existed then, and they brought it here, and it's still here, and it's still alive and well, and women and children are still victimized by polygamy, and Utah has done jack shit about polygamy issues.
When I talked to Rhea Coons, was somebody who knew a lot about polygamy, and she lived near Point of the Mountain, and I went to go visit her twice when I was at BYU. And she told me that there were leaders of the church that were practicing polygamy. She knew of bishops and stake presidents. I don't know about GAs, but she told me that yes, there were members of the church who were practicing polygamy in Utah, and this is in the 80s. So they would come to her and find out who had the authority, and they'd go to them and get the sealing.
Well, Oakston and Nielsen both have polygamous wives. The minute their wives died, they took on other wives.
Exactly.
I mean, like, if you guys are divorced and you were married in the temple, you could remarry another woman in the temple without unsealing. But me as a woman, I'm going to tell you, I've been married in the temple twice to both bishops' sons. And I've been married in the Las Vegas temple and the Bountiful temple. And it took a canceling of those things to exist. And the funny thing is, my ex-husband, who is not a member of the church anymore, we still laugh like we might still be celestially married, even though I married another man and outside of that world who was a Catholic, and we had 2 children. So who am I married to? Who do my children belong to? It's so fucking crazy. I'm sorry. That's the point we should make, is men can be sealed and sealed and sealed, because my first ex-husband got married to 4 women and I got lucky. He had babies with 3 women, and he was a Mormon returned missionary bishop's son out of Las Vegas. That's my first husband.
That's right. We have on the panel a serial polygamist, Tim Rathbone, has been married to more than one wife.
No,
we go.
My first wife was a Mormon wedding, and it took her 20 years to get our sealing canceled. My second and third wives died. My fourth wife divorced.
So, and you know, the celestial tabloids are going to be crazy, aren't they? When we
Yes.
Well,
This is just wild.
I'm going to work out in the end. Isn't that what we were told? Like,
Well,
that's
even
like,
that's even what I've heard. That's even what I've heard among some of like the younger influencers, like my age and younger, who would just they would address polygamy, and then they'd ask, well, how does all the sealings work? I don't know. God will figure it out later when we all get to heaven. And it's like, I feel like this is not a streamlined system at all. Right.
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 and what prophet got sealed to like 270 wives that were of women who were dead?
I think that was Lorenzo Snow. Is it Lorenzo Snow?
Yeah, on his birthday. Was it on his birthday, Tim? When Lorenzo was like, yes. I want a bunch of women sealed to me. I want them to be dead and alive. Like, my birthday wish is like, you all get to marry me. Hi.
And I think they rounded up the pretty girls from the local stakes to be proxy. So that
and remember, this is post manifesto also. So this is post 1890 manifesto also.
So can we talk about something real quick?
Yeah.
Like, what has to go through this guy's mind to where what he wants is his birthday is to marry women who are dead? I feel like there are better things to ask for on one's birthday.
He's making his treasure in heaven bigger.
More clothes in his crown.
Diamond Dave, my theory is on that. Money. Like, can you get my grandma, who was a bitch, into the celestial kingdom and marry her into your bloodline? Because we all believe this weird woo-woo. Like, literally, maybe it was money.
Okay, that makes sense, because I'm just like, there's got to be more to it than just someone being like, yeah, I want to be sealed to a bunch of dead women. Why not? It'll be a fun 50th birthday party, you know? 270, no less. Oddly specific number, but sure.
Well, okay. Let's not go into
And
number.
also the ego factor, just like we see prophets today wanting to put down more temples than their predecessor. Hey, I'm going to get me more wives than Brother Brigham had. So,
yes,
one-upmanship.
Oh, absolutely. I absolutely think that was something of the core of the quorum of the core. Like, I got 52 wives, you got 63, and some of mine are dead, but I got 37. And
I'd be fine with some new socks. I mean,
Okay.
Now, I just want to say, if there are any believing Latter-day Saints listening to this who justify Joseph Smith's practice of polygamy, you would have to be okay with the current church bringing it back in the same form. Imagine President Nelson having received a polygamy revelation, but sitting on it and not telling anybody about it, while he secretly seals himself to teenage girls, to President Uchtdorf's wife, to Elder Renlund's daughter, promising that if she will take this step, it will guarantee salvation for her and all of her family. You would have to be okay with that. Can you imagine? Can you imagine?
Well, when you put it in that context, none of us can imagine or believe that, but yes, you're right. Because, literally, that is how Joseph was playing the dice, okay? He was literally dipping his stick in everyone's sauce and calling it celestial. And also, if you didn't play along, he excommunicated you. So,
That's
the
right.
3 witnesses, how many of those guys were excommunicated when they called him out? Because I believe there was one guy who called the barn incident a dirty affair.
Dirty, nasty, filthy affair.
That's right.
Maybe that's why Tim Ballard got excommunicated, because he was doing it the way John C. Bennett did it. I don't know.
But if Tim Ballard got a second anointing, it doesn't count, though. Which he probably did.
He totally, okay, apparently he did. Because, Ballard.
Now,
and he was also thinking he was Nephi. He was if there's ever one guy, and I won't even say that the Mormon prophets, I will give Nelson and Oakes and all these other guys credit for not claiming the Joseph mantle. Tim Ballard literally was I'm talking to psychics. I am going in, and there's this sexual ruse where I'm convincing women to have sex with me to save people. If there was anyone on the spectrum of Joseph being reincarnated,
oh yes,
literally Tim Ballard, and then him getting online and publicly defaming his wife, saying she needs to loosen up and not wear her Mormon Jesus jammies. You married her in the temple. She's wearing the Jesus jammies, you douche bag. And having so many kids, literally, I feel like Tim Ballard is the incarnate of Joseph Smith and why no one should follow this church. And I'm so happy that both of them are coming down, because Tim Ballard is a piece of shit, just like the church is a piece of shit. They're abusing people and saying it's faith promoting. We're saving people. We're stopping trafficking. We're giving people a hall pass to heaven. No, you aren't. No, you aren't. Sorry.
No, that's fine. I never believed, because the moment, I didn't even know who Tim Ballard was until people started talking about it. And I'm oh, okay, OUR is this anti-trafficking thing. And then I heard about the couples ruse, and I'm like, wait a second. No, you don't need that at all. What I found interesting about that thing was like Tim Ballard had this whole thing on he was doing what corrupt police forces wouldn't do, right? So he would go into these countries, but he would partner with these corrupt police forces that he defamed to their face to allegedly do these things. It was one big contradictory thing for Stam.
And he might be a little bit corrupt, but I'm going to say a corrupt police officer is still better than Tim Ballard any day.
No, and I'm agreeing with you. It was just weird to me how he put this whole thing on like the couples ruse needs to happen. It's like no, it doesn't. Just go in with guns. That's it. Like problem solved.
Right. So I'm posting what I'm showing so that people can look at it and see for themselves.
Like you can use ruse to anything. Like the polygamy ruse is now alive and well because of that cartoon that the church put out. Like, oh, we're going to groom your children. Like everything's a ruse. And thank God for Tim for creating the ruse.
Yeah, Randy, if you're able to press pause on whatever you're watching and join the show, you can. And that's right. It's hard to get Debbie to really share her feelings. It's just we have to egg her.
I know. It's taken us this long to get her to open up.
Don't hold back.
We love Deb. Deb's awesome.
And Songs, if you want to come on the show, there's the link.
We invite anybody to join us in this wonderful conversation.
And if the bishop's interview is still around,
I snorted.
This will be great. It's coming back no matter what. They already have it planned. And this not only indoctrinates the children, it also indoctrinates the teachers. Remember that the teachers are going to be teaching the kids this. So they're indoctrinating the adults also.
Well,
and there are a lot of adults. There are a lot of adults. Yeah, exactly. They are indoctrinating the teachers, the adults, and the children all at once. And there are people who are going to teach this who never knew this stuff. Just remember that.
Can I just point out? I think it's odd that. Kind of going along the lines of what Rob was saying earlier, if the church is true, right? If the church is true and polygamy is a good thing, why are you trying this hard to show that it's a good thing?
Right. Exactly.
That's just weird.
Exactly.
This one time at band camp, Dave, okay? No.
Hey, we don't talk about that. We don't talk about that.
We don't talk about band camp?
No.
Yeah, so this is not an official church publication. We're just chatting about things. Mormon Stories reviewed this whole article a few weeks ago. So if you want to go to see the Mormon Story, now teaching polygamy to children, is it grooming, episode 1974. They cover that for at least 30 hours, I think. That's how long the show went. That's just my tease.
He who should not be named, the TBM of podcasters, was like even offended saying it was grooming. So when church members are saying it's grooming and ex-Mormons are like, fuck no, like this is grooming.
Wait,
okay.
We can name it.
On the same channel. Hi guys.
I'm a little slow, Deb. Who's he who cannot be named?
She who shall not be named shelf is breaking. By watching those 2 episodes of that program of that person, their shelf is definitely breaking.
I'm sure Tim's very happy to watch that shelf. He's like, the shelf is on fire.
And then tonight on Reddit, right before the program, I saw this. I could not believe this. I gotta find it. that polygamy deniers just heard that there is a group of polygamy deniers who believe that mainstream church is an apostasy and are now following Abraham Gileadi, who wants to be a polygamist, by the way. The reason that Kathy divorced him was because he was practicing some kind of polygamy. To become one of the 144,000, curious if this is in the same group that she who shall not be named belongs to. This would make a lot of sense as it relates to how she might reconcile subsequent polygamous prophets. I have yet to hear a logical explanation from polygamy deniers regarding Brigham's polygamy and his mantle as prophet. If this is what is going on in the background, the polygamy denier movement makes a lot more sense. I couldn't believe that when I saw that tonight, right before the program. A couple hours ago, it was like, oh, are you kidding me? Well, I took a class from Gileadi, okay? Gileadi is psycho. He believed that one of his sons was going to be the one mighty and strong that David spoken of in the scriptures. So I don't know what's happened with that. I know he lived at the Dream Mine for a while. So the guy.
So Abram would say, but for the grace of God, there goes I, when the Lafferty brothers murdered their niece and sister-in-law.
Hi, Megan. Megan's joined us.
I know, we're like, hi, Megan. Often the Lafferty brothers. How do you bring in that?
The Lafferty brothers? That's a good one.
Megan, what's your take on the church's indoctrinating, teaching children about Joseph Smith's polygamy, and may they be preparing to bring it back?
I'm really, really unhappy, upset, frustrated, and angry about this. I think it absolutely is abusive to indoctrinate children into accepting polygamy.
But remember, they're also indoctrinating the adults at the same time.
And also, this is the other thought I had about this, is that, forgive the expression, they're sort of backdooring this, because if they introduce it to the children, then the children are going to have questions, and the parents are going to have to come up with some kind of faithful apologetic response. Whereas if they introduced it to the parents first, then they would go, I don't like this. I have some questions. Maybe I shouldn't, I think it's really sneaky of them to introduce it to the kids first, because it forces the parents really to come up with a narrative. And it makes me angry because they're teaching children this lesson that they should follow God even when it's difficult. They're teaching kids this lesson that it's okay for adults to say things that are really confusing, that we maybe don't understand, that, are something that we never thought adults would ask us to do, but because they're telling us that God said it, we should do it anyway. It's teaching kids to dissociate from their own feelings and to outsource their critical thinking to someone else. And we don't know if those people, we actually know some of them can't be trusted. They're teaching kids that if it comes from your bishop, if it comes from a church leader, even if it seems weird or bad or difficult, you should do it anyway. And we know how many abusers there are in the church who have already taken advantage of all of these innocent children in the setting of spiritual abuse, ecclesiastical abuse. And it makes me angry because as a survivor of child SA, I can absolutely testify to you that my abusers did the exact same thing to me. They made me believe that what they were asking me to do was okay. They made me believe that it was wrong for me to tell anybody about it. And they made me believe that this is what everybody does. This is what you were meant for. This is what children are on the earth for. So this is what you should be doing. And if anybody tells you differently, they're wrong. And me growing up to believe everything that my parents said and to never question an adult or question an authority, I took in that information. I absorbed it like a sponge as a 7-year-old kid, and it stayed with me for the majority of my life. So I see the church doing the exact same thing in these polygamy cartoons to children that was done to me by an abuser when I was 7 years old. And I think it's disgusting.
So Patrick Mason
I want to bow down to Megan right now and just
all right. Megan's always got great
Such
stuff.
an important perspective.
Very, but so.
Just go like this.
I did actually catch, I don't know if it was Mormon Stories or somebody else, but people were going through like the polygamy book for kids. And at first, there's two things I kind of had. First of all, it's like, it's kind of odd that they're making a book specifically about polygamy to kids, from my perspective, even though they're like, oh yeah, it's a hard topic and kids need to learn about it. But in high school, we learned about a certain event that happened in Germany in 1940s, and we saw live videos of it. We saw real history. You didn't need a version, for kids of that, And the other thing that kind of stuck out to me, and there's one line, and I'll never forget it, that rubbed me really the wrong way, is in that book of polygamy, it says, sometimes God asks adults to do things they don't want to do. And that
are hard.
That are hard. And that hit me the wrong way, because if you take out the word adults and put in kids, completely different dynamic. And I saw that. I'm like, there's one person that's going to do that. And it's interesting to me that not a lot of people are talking about it, that I've seen anecdotally.
And there's also the book
like The Outsider Looking In, where we were all raised into like that premises that existed and it was okay. And now the church is trying to one up the okay level. And what Megan was saying, it has never been okay. And you even looking as an outsider who wasn't raised with it, this is not okay.
That sentence rubbed me the wrong way, because we're 7 minutes and 1 second in, so I could say this without this channel being demonetized. I can tell you right now, if a grown adult walked up to me or another adult and says, sometimes God asks kids to do things that are hard, they're getting shot. They're getting shot. Period. Like, you don't do that. That's just not appropriate. You know what I mean?
Dude, if someone was talking to your kid like that, you'd be like, I'm gonna kill you, motherfucker, and I'm gonna shank you on your way.
Like, I'm going to prison. Like, and I mean, like, I don't get the point of the book, honestly. Like, I just don't get the point.
Happy. Yeah. Like, oh, look at Joseph did hard things. It was so hard. It was hard on the hard. And we're all like, I'm glad X and new and real Mormons can all look at this and say this was very bad. Because I think it hit everyone. Even the real Mormons are not happy. And the ex-Mormons are not happy. And the ones looking outside of it are like super not happy. And I don't want to know how the fundamentalist true believers are looking at it, because this might be creepy if they're catering to like that fundy. Like,
and remember,
I would be curious if people are actually supporting it on whether or not they actually read it, right? And the reason why I say that is because I've seen a few people are like, yeah, it's good. It's a teaching tool for parents. And I'm like, okay, but have you read it? Like, that's the key thing.
And
if you open it up and you read it, it looks weird.
And there's also that book in Costco. There's the book in Costco that Rebecca found that gives a different point of view about polygamy, but it's in that book also. So it's not just church material, it's extra church material in Costco in Utah. And it's a different point of view.
Is this cartoon helping the cause or hurting the cause? Or is it neutralizing the cause, Tim?
the cartoons remind me of the anti-Mormon.
Tim was going to have some problems with his internet, so
I love how he's frozen.
Yeah, he's froze like that. Yeah, you broke Tim. You broke him.
I think it's that we are called, but Tim is frozen. That's the problem. I'd like to say that, when polygamy came out, it was shrouded in secrecy and half-truths or outright lies. Today in the church, polygamy is still secretive and half-truths. If polygamy were a true principle, Latter-day Saints would know the names of all those women. We would hear testimonies testifying of this divine, true, eternal principle. And that is not the case. I started my comments at the beginning of this panel with my theological justification why, if the church is true, they must bring back polygamy at least during the millennium to fulfill prophecy, to fulfill the scriptures. But do I think the church is going to bring back polygamy? No. And why? Because I believe that church leaders, their allegiance is to self-interest, public image, and corporate growth. And the optics of what bringing back polygamy would actually look like would be horrific. Can you imagine, even if they just said, okay, it's only allowed for Africans and Indians or people who have this in their culture, they can keep it. How many nations would disallow missionary work if we, taught that polygamy was okay? How many women would leave the LDS church? How many men would move to Africa so you could participate in something like this? I just feel like church leaders want so badly to be legitimized on the Christian world stage that they could never risk the PR nightmare that this would be.
So I have a question leading up to that, because that's very, yes, we all agree with, it sounds bad, but in Utah, it has been allowed to exist, and it's been bad. Like the Order, the FLDS, Warren Jeffs, the AUB. We have 3 groups that have literally, Wakashi Energy Solution used to be the name of the Delta Center. The Order owned our stuff. And so it's one thing to say, oh, we don't like it, but in Utah, these polygamous groups definitely own businesses, definitely own government contracts, definitely get federal funding, even though people might not know they're polygamous groups. And I'm sorry, if you had 300 kids, you might have 100 out of 3 that you could do industry with, and they're in cement, they're in buildings, they're in contracts. And I grew up with these kids. I grew up in Sandy, Utah, below Alta Academy. I grew up with the Barlows of the Mormon side who didn't practice polygamy after a certain generation. But you want to know who's building the biggest buildings and has the biggest contracts? It's these Mormon kids who are 2 generations away from polygamy, and we don't do polygamy anymore, but they are all affiliated. I mean, I just want to ask that, because the church allowed it, and in the 50s and in the 60s, and when my dad was a banking vice president of Zion's Bank, there was bullshit on the bullshit, I heard, but it is gotten astronomically stupid.
That almost sounds like the mafia, because that's what the mob did in New York in the 80s, where they went into government contracts and they went into cement. They went into manual labor so they could get the federal funding, they could get the government protections. That's what it sounds like.
I'm so glad you picked up on that, because like literally I watched this temple. I've lived in downtown Salt Lake for 3 years, and I've literally watched like money laundering going up and down, like making it secure. They destroyed all the historic landmarks and trees out of that building. Like literally destroyed trees and literally destroyed history. And in fact, no one could take any history out of that building. In fact, they like destroyed it on a biblical sense. But I can walk down to like an older building, which was the old courthouse, and they call it Liberty Square, built by Masons about the same time the temple was built. Beautiful. It has ghosts. It has history. It has so much fun things. You can go to the state capitol. It's an old building. No one's doing what the church says they have to do to that temple to secure the foundation. Like literally the fact that the church like built a $2 billion mall across the street and then literally took over a public street and made it their place. I don't know. I guess if you see it once your Mormon eyes come off, like when I walk downtown Salt Lake, I'm like, oh my God. Oh my God. It's like if you were a whore in a whorehouse and then you decided not to be a whore, you'd be like, everyone's a bitch and a whore.
I relate to that, just saying.
Well, I just want to point out that it's not bringing back polygamy. Polygamy never left. It's still on the book. Section 132 is still canonized scripture. It still is required for you to have more than one wife to get into heaven. And President Oaks and President Nelson are both married to more than one woman. They're both going to have 2 wives in the afterlife. So polygamy is here. It never went anywhere. They just don't talk about it anymore. Nobody has ever, I mean, yes, we have the manifestos, but the first manifesto was like, okay, we're not practicing polygamy anymore. Hey guys, go to Canada and Mexico and practice polygamy. And then when they got more pushback on it, it was like, okay, this time we're really, really not practicing polygamy anymore. But do you think all those people just went away? What? No. My 4th great grandfather founded the town of Ogden, Utah, and lived in a house with his first wife. And across the street, where you can still see it, was a duplex where his other 2 wives lived with their children. When they denounced polygamy, do you think that all of those people just stopped doing what they were doing? No, they continued to practice it because they were already married. They already had these relationships and these families. And it just has perpetuated. And until they get rid of Section 132 or take it out of the scriptures, polygamy is here to stay. And I think that they're trying to remind members, this is still part of our doctrine. This is still what we believe. It's still going to be practiced in heaven, even if it's never practiced again on earth the way that it was before.
There was another manifesto. In 1932 or 33, J. Reuben Clark finally wrote a big legal document basically ending polygamy at that point.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about, the second.
No, this is
second manifesto.
Third.
And the only reason why is because the federal government was actually doing something about polygamy and hunting them down and seizing church assets. Not just the polygamists, not just the members who were practicing it, but the church itself. Like the church itself had assets seized. Like everything came to a stop. And right, Tim?
Right. Remember also that Heber J. Grant kept his polygamous wives when he was president of the church through the 30s. My grandfather.
And I know what you're saying, wife. Tim, about that J. Reuben Clark document. I don't think there's a lot of church members that know about that, but
no, they don't.
It was like a third time's a charm, I guess. Like for real this time, we're really going to excommunicate you if you practice polygamy. Like we're not joking this time. There's no aside of like, go do it somewhere else. Like this time for real, we're going to excommunicate you.
And
We
that's
really
when
mean it this time.
And they excommunicated Lyman from the 12 in the 40s because of
Yeah.
that.
I think what we're dealing with here is human nature, not divine inspiration. And I think the government's pressure on the church when they seized assets, jailed leaders, broke up families, was so painful that the church must. I think they only tolerate the fundamentalist polygamists in Utah because they can at least distance themselves and disavow it. But yeah, they're not going to fight it because they don't want to draw attention to that issue and themselves.
Okay, so along the same line, when they raided that compound in Texas with Warren Jeffs getting arrested in the Yearning for Zion Ranch, and they took out all those children and wives, you know what was realized? Most of those children were not biologically attached to their caregiver.
No.
Yep.
So, like, Warren had already broken up families. The church had done more damage, like Warren, under that premise of FLDS, like true believing Mormons, than anyone. Like, he caused more psychological damage to those women, like yearning for their children, and then sending certain children to that place. And even Brielle Decker said this was like, the minute those kids got attached to someone who would care for them, they were immediately taken out of that system and given to another caregiver. So I feel like that's the church's MO. Like the minute you feel comfortable and you're like, I love the church, I love the hymns, like the church has the same moment MOD, like of like abuse, and then they cry victimhood, because that was the one thing you saw when they broke up that compound, were these people crying. So I think if they were to come after the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, there would be those saints who would be crying and like rendering and, you know, like doing that when they were also like the worst victims of the abuse. Like they weren't with their children, they weren't with their husbands, they weren't with their parents. They had been abused by the church. And I feel like that's why I'm like, oh, these two things run hand in hand. The church is never going to give up polygamy because the church has allowed polygamy to exist in the state of Utah, even though it was in our constitution in Utah is the only constitution that has polygamy written into it, like specifically. Like it was definitely a condition. You cannot be a state if this polygamy exists because it's bad, it's bad, it's bad.
Wow.
And guess what? Utah just went, ha ha ha, we're so cute. We just like to cute. Sorry. And rant over by Debbie. Okay.
All right.
Now,
I have a confession to make. As I was pondering on this topic of, is the church laying the foundation to bring back the practice of polygamy? We know it's a doctrine, we know it's spiritually practiced, but the actual practice of it. I was reminded of all those times I sat with other men in the priesthood, and when this topic came up, the right answer would be, well, you know, I can hardly handle the wife that I do have. I wouldn't want to have to do polygamy. And I was the guy in the corner being real quiet because as I was putting things on my shelf, polygamy was the last thing I put on my shelf. Why? It sounded pretty good to me. I mean, my wife is awesome. And if I could clone her and there were two, you know, identical of her, that would be all right, you know. And I've seen time and time again on Reddit, people ask, what would it take for you to come back to church, you expos? And if they brought back polyandry, polyamory, polygamy, I'd think about it. I'd consider it. This is where you're supposed to laugh and not take it too seriously.
I'm laughing out loud. I'm like, yes, because I want a woman who can do laundry because I hate it. I would bring back polygamy literally for laundry. Okay.
For laundry purposes. Okay, great.
Laundry.
Only for laundry?
Sandwich purposes.
Oh my God, okay, but also as a woman, I would want 7 husbands because I want someone who can make a good sandwich. I want someone who can make me laugh. I want someone who's good in bed. I want someone who can cuddle. And I want someone who can literally be a good dad, but also supportive coach. I get why men want a lot of things. But as a woman, I'm like, if it was allowed, I would want the same thing. So if polygamy is going to be allowed and you get 7 wives to fulfill your 7 things, I want 7 husbands to fulfill my 7 personal things. And you do your job and you participate and you're spiritually uplifted. And amen, amen, amen.
Yes.
Okay, but to get, it's fun to joke about it, right? But what I keep coming back to is how harmful it is for everybody involved. It's not just harmful to women, but it's harmful to children. It's harmful to men too. It's harmful to families. And if the church was really about families, they never would have considered polygamy. And it's obviously, I think, Joseph's idea, and I think him,
came true. I agree.
Just him covering up for the fact that he wanted to sleep with a bunch of women, and he's like, how do I get away with this? I know, I'll get a revelation, and I'll tell my wife she has to do it. It just the whole fabrication of it. But there are several men, and I want to say that 2 of them at least are NFL players, and I want to say that maybe there's a comedian who did the same thing, who live in a compound with several women and have lots and lots of children. There's one guy in particular, and I wish I could remember his name, but it came up for me when I first heard about this, what was it, a month ago, and 20,000 things have happened since then, so I totally forgot. But what I'm thinking about is this guy who lives in a compound with 5 women, and he has 14 children, I think. And the thing that I regret more than anything else in my life was that I didn't have enough time to spend one-on-one with my 6 children. That's one of my hugest regrets. And what I think is one of the most harmful things about polygamy is that whether or not everybody's on board or whatever, one man does not have the time to devote what is needed to be devoted to all of those children. If you can't have one-on-one conversations with your individual children because their needs are so different, it's a detriment to those children. Yeah. And it doesn't matter the fact that they're not married. They just have an understanding, right? In this compound, he's not married to all 5 of them. He just is married to one of them. The rest of them live there. He pays for their lives. He's rich enough to pay for their lives, but he doesn't have the individual time to know every one of those children and to be a positive influence on them. Those children are growing up without a positive father figure in their lives. And that creates very specific emotional wounds and emotional problems that become generational. And this is what a lot of people don't consider, is that the father wound, if you don't heal it, you pass it on to your other children. It infects all of your relationships, and it doesn't matter what the reason for the wound is. But when you're in a situation, even if it's all consensual between the adults, the children are the one who suffer for that.
Yes, and I've seen it in my family. My great-grandfather had 1 wife in Wyoming and 1 in Idaho. And when we'd get together for family reunions, they'd argue about where Grandpa spent the most time. He spent more time with your family than our family, and they'd be pointing fingers at each other. And my grandmother was born after the first manifesto, and I can still feel the embarrassment from that to this
Generational
day.
trauma.
Generational trauma from my mother to me. So yes, it's not good for families because they point fingers a lot.
Yeah, and I interviewed Anna LeBaron.
So I have a question first. How many of us are products of polygamy here? Okay, everybody but Diamond Dave.
Yeah, everybody but me. I'm the lowly convert. Like, I'm the outsider.
Okay. So we all have
Lucky
generational trauma from polygamy.
Yeah.
Well, because Tim, I went to the same family reunions with my grandpa and the other family where it was like, oh, well, yeah, you feel that in a family. You're that connected because, like I said, my grandpa was from polygamy after the manifesto.
Yeah.
And it's absolutely true.
Well, what's interesting too is like polygamy, even if you look at like historically or even just practically, like when you have multiple kids with multiple wives under one setting, who becomes the heir when the father dies? You know what I mean? Then it's just a shit show of everyone fighting over whatever, and that'll break up the family in an instant as well. Because you have many cultures around the world where the LDS Church is in that does not have polygamy, but male heirs are important, right? And so if the church were to do the polygamy thing, that would be highly problematic as well for that reason.
Right. And to Megan's point from a few minutes ago about the fatherhood thing, Anna LeBaron was part of the LeBaron group, and she saw her dad maybe 3 or 4 times a year, usually at night, because for safety reasons, security reasons, you know, or just on some trip or something. And she barely knew him, you know.
Yeah.
You know, my dad worked nights, but I would see him at dinner time, you know.
Right.
If polygamy were a true and good principle and it were good for families and good for children, I think we would see psychiatrists, psychologists advocating for it. The church would be pushing for it in countries where they could do it. But that is just not what we see. My personal opinion is that this cartoon that came out is something that I'm sure church leaders reviewed that before it went out, right? And I bet they are reluctantly doing it because they have to defend Joseph Smith's reputation, because that is the source of their authority and their power. And I wonder if secretly they're starting to get a little tired of having to defend Joseph, whether it's the Book of Abraham or, you know, the JST or polygamy. It's an exhausting job.
That's so funny because, like, literally they're getting tired of defending the guy who restored their, like, coming into the whole
Their empire.
Yes.
Well, and I mean, like, along Rob's point, I brought this up earlier. I mean, if polygamy was good, why is it so controversial, and why are we even here? You know what I mean? Like, why is there so many podcasts and so many people getting on random hours of the day, debating, discussing polygamy, whether it's good, whether it's bad? Like, if it was good, it would just be, you know?
Here's the thing I discovered about polygamy, and I'm just going to say you can go research this if you want to research if it's good or bad, is when we were trying to put polygamists on the victims fund, like people who had been victims of human trafficking, domestic abuse, and we passed that bill, my friend Angela and I. We did so much research in Utah because we had to make it not a religious thing, but a victims thing. And we were like really trying to wrap our head around this like concept of, is it religious doctrine to be a polygamist, and what does that mean, versus being on the outside, and does it like actually victimize people? And we had interviewed so many people who were victims that we were kind of like, it sounded obvious, but to passed that kind of legislation and the bill, which it did pass. Hey.
Congrats.
Thank you. I literally read through every congressional record that is online on Utah becoming a state, because the biggest linchpin in Utah becoming a state was polygamy. They did not want Utah to become a state with the polygamy factor. Mm-hmm. And that was number one, because anyone who looked into it and saw what it was doing to the state of Utah said, this is wrong, this is bad, this is harming women and children, this is creating systems of abuse. And if you want to look back into 1800s, if they could identify that and argue it, and you can read the congressional records, it is real. It is absolutely real. And so that is why it was specifically put and canonized into our Utah Constitution to become a state. Utah, because you were founded by Mormon polygamists, you cannot have this in your doctrine anymore. And because of these reasons, and if you read the words in our state constitution and in those things, it's because it's so harmful, and because they researched it so hardcore. Mm-hmm. So I am absolutely insane that FLDS still existed in Utah, and Brielle Decker went through what she had to do, becoming a 65th wife at 18 to a polygamous prophet who was a pedophile. I am absolutely insane to any woman who has fled polygamy, like all of my good friends that I've interviewed personally in those groups. Amanda Ray still does a channel on the Kingston group that had Wakashi downtown Salt Lake. It used to be not the Delta Center, it was the Wakashi. Like, these guys have so much money and power, these polygamists. They have as much power as the church in the state of Utah, and I'm sick of Mormon. I'm a Democrat. I'm all for vote, but I am sick of these people with their, I mean, literally, like, it's an abuse cycle. And that's what they said when they looked into the state of Utah, is it's a cycle of abuse, because these people are like literally only promoting their sons, their daughters into business and industry. And it's like Diamond Dave said, it's like a cartel. It's like the mafia. It is so creepy. It is almost on that. Well, I'm not going to say it's creepy or wrong. I'm going to say it is a Mormon cartel at this point. And they had a secret, like, trust fund. Oh, here in the state of Utah. And they have a law firm that is literally telling people how to get away with sexually abusing children.
But I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but I heard that some FLDS groups, I mean, I would agree that it could be considered a cartel, because aren't some of the FLDS groups like armed to the teeth? Like, I heard they have their own militias.
They do.
Yeah, in Colorado City, I mean, basically, it's a small enough community that the polygamous group controls the police and the government in the city. And so, you know, you can't really be against what they're doing. And the police are never going to go in there and, you know, raid the place or, you know, arrest people, because they're all in the pockets of the FLDS, who basically pay for the town. But I wanted to address this comment that I see on here. It says, perhaps back in the days, polygamy was a good thing if kids were dying anyway due to low survival rate. If there's a lack of quality men back in the day, I see how polygamy was helpful. So this was like the apologetic answer that I got all the time when I was a 14-year-old kid asking why in the world would God make people do this? And the things that I got told were things like, oh, you know, all of these men were dying when they crossed the plains. And so none of these women had men to take care of them. And so somebody had to marry them to take care of them. No, that was not the case. Kids were not dying due to low survival rate. There was not a lack of quality men back in the day. None of these are the reason why polygamy was instituted. Polygamy was instituted by Joseph Smith all the way back at the very beginning of the church, before the Mormons ever crossed the plains, because he wanted to sleep with lots of women. That's the bottom line. It was never instituted as a societal remedy for anything that was happening. It was never instituted as a way to correct some kind of disparity between men and women. There was no benefit to anybody in society for polygamy except Joseph Smith. And I believe one of the main reasons that Brigham Young wanted to take it over is because he was a short, bald, bigoted idiot who couldn't get a woman in the first place. And the only way he could is if polygamy was still in play, and then he could marry whoever he wanted, and he did.
And
Amen.
and the stated reason for polygamy is to raise up seed. And the Utah statistics show that was less successful than paired up one man, one woman,
Yes.
which produces more children.
And also, that reason totally refutes anybody who says that polygamy was not about sex. It 100% was about sex, because it was the quoted reason to raise up seed, which you can't do if you're not having sex. There's also really good evidence to suggest that John C. Bennett was practicing abortions in the Nauvoo period. There's an excellent LDS discussion episode that covers the data and the evidence for that. And I would love it if everybody would go and watch that and listen to it. It was so eye-opening and mind-blowing to me. And it answered one of the main questions that I've always had, is that if Joseph Smith was sleeping with all these women, where were the babies? Why weren't there any? This is some really good evidence and explanation for that.
You had an abortionist friend. But I'm going to ask you, Megan, a question. Because the 23andMe, apparently we could link all of that quicker than the temple does, like, genealogy, and I'm doing it, apparently. But I want to know what you think about, God, where was we going with this question? Hold on. I literally did a brain fart, and that's not good. Because of genealogy, because the polygamists, I know the Kingstons do genealogy because they had a problem with inbreeding. So they are absolutely using that technology to make sure they don't get uber inbreeding, because they were having genetic issues with the inbreeding that they were doing in the Kingston group, so you can't marry too close. So why doesn't the church use that same technology? Because I believe, like, I'm probably cousins with you and Tim, and
well, we know we're related to the Bushes.
Well, Tim and I know we're related. That's the funny thing.
Yeah, I always say, you know, I'm a 7th generation Mormon. I'm descended from polygamists, so I have to be really careful who I date, because, you know, one of my first cousins actually married somebody who was so we're descended from the first wife of Pleasant Green Taylor, and her husband was descended from the third wife of Pleasant Green Taylor. So it's enough generations removed that it's like not a genetic problem, but still, like, they didn't find this out till they'd been married for several years, right? So I mean, I wish that the church would do some more to like make sure, like to do that, 23andMe, I think you're right, could do a lot more for genealogy, a lot faster than a bunch of little old ladies in the family history library. So much of that genealogy is just flat wrong. I did a lot of this research back in the early 2000s, 2010s. I did all of my former husband's genealogy because he wasn't a Mormon. His family wasn't Mormon. And what I found were that there were so many mistakes and there's so much garbage in there that is not supported by any documentation that I would guess probably 60% of it is wrong. There are so many people claiming to be able to trace their lineage back to Charlemagne, to be related to all these famous people and whatever. And it's just not correct because there's no documentation to support it. So the whole genealogy thing sort of angers me anyway. But I also want to address just one more time, I appreciate respectful disagreement, but I'm going to say there are not a good amount of people on the planet promoting polygamy just because of one man. One man found a way to explain it and to get away with it. And all the other men who wanted to do the same thing were like, I'm on board, sign me up. It's kind of like, Rob was saying, it's like, hey, if we can figure out a way to do it, let's do it. Except these guys were serious about it. There are 50,000 people who are in polygamy right now because Joseph Smith found a way to spiritually explain it so that it was quote unquote acceptable to God. He made infidelity acceptable in God's eyes. And that sort of gave everybody else the okay to say, well, a prophet of God said it. And so who am I to argue with God? I really hate this, but I'm going to go ahead and go through with it. It's like we all have this sort of selfishness in us where we want to be able to do stuff like that and get away with it. And when we see somebody else do it, it's like, oh, he did it. Why not me? So those of us who don't have the self-awareness to be able to deal with those darker desires or those like shadow traits of ours, we're going to give in when somebody else gives us permission to do it. And this was not this tacit permission, but it was.
Aren't telling you to have sex with a 14-year-old or a 13-year-old or a minor, Bateman's situation where he had a spiritual bride who was a 9-year-old. Like, I hope in your philosophy of like rationalization, it's not like to marry your uncle or your cousin like they do in the Kingston group. That's the weird and the wrong and the harmful part of this doctrine that we're talking about polygamy. It's not just like, oh, I believe in Jesus, he died on a cross. No, this is like, oh, I believe in polygamy, he said I can marry a 14-year-old. Fuck no. So fuck no in my book. And
I'm gonna get a t-shirt with that on.
Yeah. Thank you.
And
I'm sorry,
Joseph
I
Smith,
ruined the algorithm, but it's one thing to believe in like someone died on a cross and it was so beautiful and I'm a Christian, woo woo woo, versus like polygamy doctrine, which is so toxic because it justifies the abuse of women, men, and children and says it is absolutely gospel. And we've seen it. Bateman literally sentenced just like a few months ago, 50 years. Thank God. And he was the second version of Warren Jeffs. He was like Warren Jeffs 2.0. That's just within FLDS. I mean, oh my God. That's when you have so much money because no one's been able to conquer what's going on in LDS. We know there's so much sexual abuse and there's so much child abuse. It is literally covered up by a law firm I walk by and it's next to a hot dog stand. Guess what's next to that beautiful building? There's literally a hot dog stand. It's kind of creepy. Just saying.
And for anyone who is a believer in the church or a supporter of Joseph Smith's polygamy, what I would love to say to you is, when you look at polygamy, you have to recognize that it is full of harm, deception, corruption, and then you must attribute that to Jesus Christ, that he is the author and the instigator of all this.
Good point.
Good luck
Great
with that.
Beautiful point.
Yeah,
Like,
this is
Jesus
this
was
to
a
bring this
failure.
all the way back around to the original topic. Like this is the legacy of the Mormon Church, and this is why they're trying so hard to cartoonify polygamy, to make it seem like it was okay, that the founder of their church was actually a predator, because he actually did separate a young woman from her parents, wait until everybody was out of town, and then proposition her, and then threaten her eternal salvation if she didn't come to the same conclusion that she was supposed to be his next wife. That is predatory behavior. And he did it over and over again, the same pattern of taking young women into his house and then saying, oh, guess what? You're supposed to be my next wife. And then using his quote unquote authority to justify that predatory behavior. So I think that the Mormon Church has no choice but to try in every possible way that they can to make this, I don't know, more palatable. And I think it's really disgusting that they're trying to do it through a cartoon teaching children about it, because they're basically grooming these children. And I think it's abusive. And I think it just perpetuates what we've seen happen in the church time and time again, where priesthood leaders use their authority to, to abuse people. Because the church has made it possible for them to do so. They refuse to put in the kind of reasonable restrictions that would get rid of that kind of behavior, like having background checks. And instead, they've enabled the abusers. And so we know where their priorities are. Their priorities are not with the children who are being abused. The priorities are not with the women who get abused in coercive control situations because their husband lords the priesthood over them. Their priority is for those 15 men in that ivory tower in Salt Lake to stay in power. That's all they care about.
Correct.
Exactly.
I want to read something about Joseph Smith. This is from Mike Quinn. This is from an email that Mike sent me years ago. Based on the accounts of William Clayton's diary for arranging tryst for Joseph Smith and his plural wives, plus similar reminiscences by brothers, parents, guardians, and friends of others of his 35-plus wives, I think it's reasonable to estimate that at the most, Joseph had sexual intercourse with one plural wife in the morning at some intermediary's house, with a second plural wife in the afternoon at another intermediary's house, and a third plural wife at some intermediate house in the evening before he returned to his wife Emma's bed for the night. With a dozen plural wives he had in Nauvoo by 1843, I don't think that's an exaggeration for 1842 to 44. So Joseph was having sex 3 times a day for at least 2 years.
He was a total sex addict.
Thank you for sharing that, Tim.
Was like
You're welcome.
literally a sex addict and a sex offender and probably a rapist and a pedophile. We can verify and testify. I believe in all of those things about Joseph, but they wanted me as a member of the church to say he was a prophet and testify to that.
No.
Fuck you. I will never testify to Joseph being a prophet. I will testify he was probably like Harvey Weinstein, Puff Diddy, like creepy creepazoid on the level of no. Before I would say he's a prophet, he restored the gospel.
Part of this is the reason why the church will not release the Clayton diaries, is because of these things are in there. Okay.
I think a lot of it too is like, I think the church is kind of screwed either way, because like they're trying to be more mainstream Christian, right?
Yeah.
So they're going to have to address polygamy somehow. But like Tim said, they can't just go releasing all the documents because that would fly in the face of them trying to get on board with mainstream Christianity and everybody else. You know what I mean?
But you know what? Christians are never going to accept them because they used to vilify. Back in my day, they vilified Christians. Like the Catholics.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
Were the enemy. Like the Methodists were the enemy. So I don't know why they think that all those Christian groups are going to allow them to get in bed with them, so to speak.
Well,
I don't know either, but they're trying apparently. So
the Christians only use the Mormons because they're a good voting bloc. Otherwise, they have no use for them.
And a future
I
bank
agree
account.
with that, Sam. You're 100% correct.
Hey, Debbie, I think Robert wanted to add something.
I just want to say, if I could muster just a little bit of empathy for today's LDS church leaders, I would say that this cartoon for the children is probably something that they feel compelled to do, not that they want to do, and that they are forced to either admit that their founder was an adulterer, a serial adulterer who did not follow the rules of his own revelation, which prophesies that the consequence for not following the rules of D&C 132 is to be destroyed in the flesh and handed over to the buffetings of Satan, which he was. So it's either admit your guy's an adulterer or find a way to downplay and justify it. And I think I understand why they're doing what they're doing.
Well, absolutely, because yes. And have you done a TikTok video of that scenario? I would love to see it.
I'll do it.
Yeah, yes, please write that one down because I'm like, you're absolutely right. Like, are we forced to believe him or are we forced to like send him down that slippery slope to apparent hell, or salvation, because polygamists feel like their only way into salvation is polygamy, versus like us on the outside, we're like the slippery slope is like polygamy leads to hell.
I was going to say to Tim that the church hasn't released the diaries of who? Who was the diaries that Tim was saying that are going to be released?
William Clayton, Hiram Smith, Oliver Cowdery.
They want to combine it with a cartoonized version of the diaries first. You know, they want to make sure those are all done because that's the only way they're going to be able to explain it.
Read Hiram Smith's diaries because I feel like he was the ringleader of Joseph. You know, like the older brother of the brother. I mean, Tim, you might have seen some of Hiram's writings, but I feel like wasn't like Hiram the instigator of like a lot of things or the back door?
Hiram.
He was Joseph's errand boy.
Brother.
Yeah.
His emissary.
For me, the William Clayton diaries were my shelf breaker. When William came to Joseph and said, "Hey, you know, my plural wife Martha's pregnant. What am I going to do if I get pulled in front of the high council? Nobody knows about polygamy." And Joseph says, "I'll give you a good scolding, cut you off from the church, and rebaptize you. You'll be as good as new." I realized right then that these sacred priesthood ordinances, the holy name of Jesus Christ, were just playthings, just to be used to manipulate and to maintain their power and prestige.
I thought you were going to realize that Joseph was a really forgiving man.
The only
That's a great point. Oh, as a man, I appreciate that. Like, yeah, because you know, we all have different things we feel when it comes down to like what the F. So, thank you.
The only reason the form was started was to keep polygamy a secret. The only reason it exists is to keep polygamy a secret. Wasn't it about that keeping polygamy. Everybody was my great grandfather polygynous. Create that polygamy.
Tim, turn off your video and leave your microphone on and
Yeah.
see if that helps.
Tim's underwater apparently. He went for a swim.
He's like the Charlie's.
Good.
Now,
Turn off your camera, Tim, and just talk.
how's that?
Keep on talking.
Is that better?
Yes.
A little better.
1, 2, 3, testing. 1, 2. How do I feel? Boom.
Well, I guess it's not going to work, Tim. Sorry.
California is burning, babes. Okay, it's burning.
Let me come back.
I think the aliens are interrupting his signal.
It's the portal.
Yeah, it's
It's the portal.
this topic is so heavy it killed Tim's internet.
Right, Diamond?
There's not enough bandwidth on the planet to deal with this.
I agree.
Where do we go from here is what it's saying. It's like wah, 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 wah.
Is that better?
A little bit.
Yeah, turn off your camera again, though.
Turn on my camera. Is it better?
Okay, now say what you're
A
going to
little
say.
better.
What was I? The annoying quorum will create polygamy. Amount of the annoying quorum. It's not about saying that or stuff that wish to keep polygamy.
I think
Yeah,
Tim is saying
You're
that.
just going to have to type it into the chat, Tim.
I think Tim is saying he's pro polygamy and he likes the cartoon. That's what I got. Just kidding. I'm just kidding.
Shots fired. Oh my God, Megan is just going off.
Rob, you're muted. Rob, muted. Rob.
Rob, you're muted.
You're muted.
There we go.
I'm sorry. I think Tim was actually speaking in tongues, and I'm going to interpret it. God declares the Latter Daily Digest the greatest podcast of all time.
There you go. I wasn't going to say it, but there are the Brody Awards coming up.
I also found the lost 116 pages of Tim's speech, and that is like, subscribe, and consider becoming a channel member for early access as well as unique perks.
Oh God, hear the words in my mouth. Oh God, hear the words in my
LAL. LAL. LAL.
You guys have better stuff.
Yeah, so Deb, to your question, where do we go from here? I would not want to be in the church committee that came up with that cartoon and approved it and put it out, because I'm fairly certain that they've seen a lot of this backlash, and I think that they know how damaging it is. And I'm sure that the apologists are scrambling to come up with some good reasons why they would do this. That it absolutely is grooming. I don't think there's a way for the church to dial this back without it looking really bad. But this is kind of, what has happened throughout history. And the first instance of it, I think, we can point to is polygamy. They didn't stop polygamy because women were complaining about it or because children were complaining about never seeing their dads. They stopped polygamy because their statehood was threatened, because their financial status was threatened. And they didn't end the priesthood and baptismal ban for Black people because of the activism of Black people. They ended it because their tax exempt status, again, was being threatened. The university was being threatened with Title IX implications, among other things. But it's not ever because of doing the right thing or because of pressure from marginalized groups. It's because some kind of threat comes to their financial system or to their power. And so they're not ever going to stop this kind of behavior. They may dial things back. They may take the cartoon down. They may revise it, something like that, because of all of this backlash, but they're not going to stop doing these things unless somebody threatens their power or their money. So where do we go from here? We keep calling it out. We keep talking about it. We keep pointing out why it's harmful. Not that just that they did another stupid thing, but why it's harmful and why it hurts people and why people need to have their eyes open and understand this is not just a church that's behaving badly. This is a church that is harming people. They are crying oppression all the time when they are the ones who are the oppressors to the marginalized groups. And so what do? We keep talking about it and we keep calling it out and we keep calling it what it is. It's abusive. It's horrible. The church needs to stop it. And we need to keep trying to do whatever we can to hold them accountable.
Amen.
That was amazing, first of all. Second of all, I just want to say if anyone from the church is watching this, all of this could have been avoided if you just stuck with the I Am a Mormon campaign back in like the early 2000s, right? You didn't have to give that up. I am a Mormon. People liked that. You could have kept that and not done this. Everything would have been fine.
Because it was tested in Scientology, and they said, I am a Scientologist, and it worked. And so the Mormon church grabbed onto that. And I think today somebody died who's an ex-Scientologist, or not today, but a couple of days ago.
Yeah.
The blower. Yeah.
There's
Yep.
Who was that?
I agree with you, Diamond Dave. And also, maybe on the strengthening the church members committee or whatever, they should, have an outside person, you wouldn't even have to pay somebody as a consultant to say, maybe this isn't a good look for you. And here's why. Here's how this is going to look to everybody who's not a true believing Mormon. Maybe just consider it. I don't know.
And I will say this about the I'm a Mormon campaign is all the things that we hated that we are now rebelling against, like the mall, the trust fund, happened under Hinckley and all those other prophets. So they were just better at promoting they were just better promoters. Like, it's like, oh, he was a better celebrity for the Mormon church. Like, Nelson is not as palatable, and neither will be Oaks. But I'm sorry, Nelson or Hinckley and Hinckley was literally like the Mormon prophet everyone loved, and he went out there and promoted himself and promoted the church and the I'm a Mormon campaign, and most of the financial abuse happened under him.
Great comments.
Right?
My vote would be what do we do from here? Keep giving the microphone to women who have been affected by polygamy and let their voices be heard finally. I hope Gene can maybe interview some more.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because the polygamy thing
says
is
that
wrong.
there's a pneumo in here now.
The pneumo?
Hi, Sam.
Welcome,
Well,
Newman.
Jim, you've been married 5 times. I've been married 3 times. Let's talk about how it's worked with marriage when you've been married, not in the religious system, but in a political system, like legal system. I'm still best friends with one ex-husband. I'm not best friends with another ex-husband. I mourn another husband. So literally I don't think churches should have autonomy over relationships in my book, because I think if you love someone, you love someone, and there's religion can't define that.
Oops.
She's a little lost to cock it up. That's really funny.
Well, it sounds like none of us are in favor of polygamy coming back. Can we have a vote, show of hands? Do we actually think they will bring it back within the next 20 years?
I think they'll bring it back.
I'm on the fence, honestly, because I don't
Do I support it?
know what they're doing. I see both. I see like Deb's side. I see Rob's side, and it's like I don't know. Right now, it could go either way. Honestly, I don't know what the church is doing. I don't think the church knows what it's doing right now either. So, I mean, who knows? I mean,
I don't know. There's a part of me that I see some of the patterns of behavior of the church, and there's a part of me that recognizes that they're trying to make themselves more mainstream Christian, and there's a lot of evidence to that effect. But then they come out and do something like this, and it makes me wonder if they see the bleeding happen. They know that they only have, around 4.5 million actual active members, and it makes me wonder if they're curating their audience. And if they're trying to get to the point where they're like, well, we're losing people anyway, we might as well go back to the fundamentals. So I'm on the fence. I don't know. I sure hope that they're not trying to bring it back. But at this point, honestly, nothing that they did would ever surprise me. Because I think they're going to just stick on that path of doing whatever they can to keep the old men in power. Like, just that's all they really care about. They're so far removed. The 15 are so far removed from actual real Latter-day Saint people who are faithful believing members that they have no idea what those people want or need the church to be. All that they're doing is repeating dogma over and over and trying desperately not to lose more members, and trying to keep people paying tithing. It's one of the reasons why they made the switch from free agency to moral agency and started telling people you don't have a choice whether you're going to go on a mission. You agreed to serve a mission already, because they know that additional indoctrination is going to keep more people in the church. But even that indoctrination is failing, because something like 60% of returned missionaries leave the church after they get home from their mission. So I think they know they're bleeding, and they're trying to scratch and claw their way into not being taken down.
It's almost like even if they could see around corners, they wouldn't. They're too old to be able to.
They destroyed all the social cohesion to keep it together. They destroyed their management, coaches, everything. There's no reason to keep the youth.
I did not catch that. Did anyone else catch that?
Tim was talking about the fact that they took away road shows. They took away lots of the other activities that people were doing. Like the only thing they do is trek, right?
Yeah. They took away all the fun stuff, so they don't care about keeping the youth.
When we grew up, I didn't have to trek. I mean, it became like apropos after. I got to go down the Moab River. That was our thing. It was fun.
Maybe they're going to have a polygamy trek.
Yeah, why do we reenact Trek but not polygamy? Be more interesting.
Why not a polygamy role play instead of Trek? Why don't we let some of the young men select 4 or 5 of the girls that they like, and just
So band camp.
Yeah.
We'll call it boys and girls camp.
So one thing, so we're pretty much we're over time. I like to do like an hour and a half. We don't want to keep Tim, it's past his bedtime. He's got to get his sleep in. But also, we had fun sometimes a couple of weeks ago talking about whatever it was. I can't remember. But tonight's another good topic, and it's just like we're in a living room talking, and we could go on for hours. In fact, after the show's over, a lot of times we do hang out and talk amongst ourselves. And so probably the link would still work, even I think, if anybody wanted to hop in. But I'm not sure about that. But anyhow, one thing that Rob brought up and other places have is that there's something called voting for the Brody Awards. And Megan has an awesome channel. And sometimes Latter Daily Digest has a good channel. And so if anybody wanted to just explore this page anyway, it's, you can vote for different categories.
Yes.
Here, where is it? It's down here somewhere. Latter Daily Digest has
Woohoo!
a vote.
All right.
Look, we're ahead of Exmo Lex, Backyard Professor.
Oh,
We need a couple more votes to pass up Cults to Consciousness. And she's awesome. Can't remember her name.
good. Yes, we're all amazing.
Elise Ansola. We're only 40 votes behind Nemo the Mormon. So there's 40 something people watching now. So we'll get Megan's channel in there. And, just kind of fun to look at and see what's going on. I think nobody cares about Mormon stories anymore. I don't know. Like we're ahead of Mormon stories.
They won all the awards already.
Yeah. Yeah. How are you ahead of John Dolin? How did that happen?
Yeah.
Yeah, John is like literally asking himself that diamond.
So I think I put the link to this show in the
Oh, well, that's a cool poll.
in the comment section. I'll put it again. Main Street Plaza.
I'm sorry. What is MB asking me to link?
So I did it. I put the Main Street Plaza in the description, in the chat, and I'll put it in the description of our podcast here in a second. Well, actually, Megan, you would have to do it for your channel.
Oh yeah.
Add to the description.
I'm not even nominated, so.
But yeah, people can get it from there, or you can get it from my channel, or look up the Brody Awards, 2024 Brody Awards, and you'll get there. But anyway, thanks everybody for sticking around. And we're at the start of the new year.
Oh, and so many great comments. I would say to Megan, Diamond Dave, everyone who contributed. Like, this was such a fun conversation because it is a deep dive on polygamy, and I love your input because I have been a product of it, like some of you, and Diamond Dave, who has not. And it was great. Let's hash it out session. Yes. Thank you.
We have to laugh about it so we don't cry.
Yeah. On an unrelated topic, it is the start of January 2025, so make sure you guys get ready to do your taxes.
Yay.
Let's see. Tim, let's test your mic and see.
I figure we're talking about like a hard-hitting, heavy subject anyway. Like, you can't get any lower than that. You might as well talk about lighten the mood with taxes.
Maybe in February.
That's what I'm trying to do.
In February, we can have a Diamond Dave's help everybody with their taxes on Tuesdays with Tim.
Oh, you can't afford me. You cannot afford me. I can tell you that right now.
Yeah, Tim, your volume is just not working. Get that internet fixed. Thanks, Tim, for letting us be in your living room. Thanks, everybody, for watching.
Thank you, Tim.
A good 2024.
Love
and,
your living room.
2025, I mean. And like I remember that when we were kids, Tim, it would be in the year 2525 if man is still alive. But anyway, it's only 2025, not 2525, but we're still alive.
Oh my goodness.
Thanks a lot. Bye-bye, everybody.
Good night.
Thanks, everybody. Good night.
Deuces.